that? All right. Well, good morning. You gonna shut the doors? Thank you. You shut the doors. So, we're in Isaiah. Going to finish up one chapter, and we'll see how many we get through. This is all about these next several chapters are all about basically different parts of the world being assailed, if you better word, assaulted by the Assyrians and taken up by the Assyrians. So it's just successive. It talks about Damascus. It talks about, I think I still left in there the Philistines, and then it talks about Moab, and it talks about another one. I don't know if we'll get to another one, but it talks about those different areas. Matter of fact, Isaiah has 2 chapters devoted to Moab. So we'll get through all that, but it should go fairly quickly because it's not deep. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. For Isaiah, that's unusual to be straightforward. Okay, so judgment on Assyria. So it kind of goes backwards. It kind of says what's the latest, and then it starts to work with what already happened back from there. So this is judgment on Assyria. We talked a little bit about this one. Where the Lord of hosts says, surely I said I have intended, so it has happened, and just as I had plans, so it will stand, to break Assyria in my land, and I will trample him on my mountains. Then his yoke will be removed from them, and burden removed from their shoulder. This is the plan devised against the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out against all the nations. For the Lord of hosts has planned, and who can frustrate it? And as for his stretched out hand, who can turn it back? So what did God use to break the Assyrians in my land on blah, 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 blah? In other words, what did he use? Who did he use? We talked about that last week. Remember? What kingdom came up after the Assyrians? The Babylonians. It was Nebuchadnezzar that took the Assyrian Empire. So God used Nebuchadnezzar. And you can kind of see when we went through the book of Daniel where God was using Nebuchadnezzar. And when Nebuchadnezzar said, look at everything I did, what happened to him? God struck him and says, you didn't do it. I did it for you. So, judgment on Philistia. Where's Philistia located in reference to Israel and Judah? Just west, between the Mediterranean and Israel. The Philistines. Philistia is where the Philistines are from. So they're located just to the west. So it's judgment on that region. And that's why I said it's going back in time, because what he first talks about is the judgment on Syria. But who carried out the judgment on Philistia? The Assyrians. So he's going kind of back in time when he's talking about it. It's kind of backwards. In that year that King Ahaz died, this oracle king. Stop there for a second. King Ahaz. What kind of king was he? He's king of which area? North or south? Israel or Judah? South. Okay. Ahab was north. Ahaz was south. So King Ahaz has just died when this oracle came. So it puts it late with Isaiah, because you had 3 kings, Ahaz being one of them, and the next king after him is Hezekiah. So you have well into it that Isaiah has been there prophesizing in this one. So this is when this oracle came to King Ahaz. Do not rejoice, O Philistia, all of you, because the rod that struck you is broken. For the serpent's root, a viper, will come out, and its fruit will be a flying serpent. Those who are helpless will eat, and the needy will lie down in security. I will destroy your root with famine. I will kill you off your survivors. Wail, O gate, cry, O city, melt away, O Philistia, all of you. For smoke comes from the north, and there is no straggler in his ranks. How then will one answer the messengers of one nation that the Lord has founded Zion, and the afflicted of his people will seek refuge in it? So, who did God destroy before the Assyrians, and who did he use them to destroy? He destroyed Philistia, the Philistines, okay? He used the Assyrians to do that. So the Assyrians were the tool of God at that particular time to take Philistia and take them out. What was the relationship between Judah and Philistia? What did the Philistines do to Saul? They were the ones who challenged him with Goliath. They were the ones who eventually killed Saul and Jonathan and nailed them to the wall or to the outside of the fort. Okay, that was the Philistines. So there were always conflicts between the Philistines and the Jews. And so here's where Isaiah says, Philistines is going to be destroyed. And that's all he has to say about Philistia. Now he goes on to Moab, and he spends 2 chapters on Moab. So we'll talk about Moab. Here's a map. What you've got here is, here's the kingdom of Judah. Here's Philistia right here. That he just talked about in that last part of the chapter. Now he's going to talk about the east. So these areas here have been conquered by the Assyrians. Now he's just talked about the Assyrians taking out this part of the country, and he's getting ready to talk about him taking out this part of the country, which is Moab. So they're moving down. The Assyrian Empire is moving down and taking down all these pieces. And Judah's right in the middle. So you can kind of see how it's moving down. So the oracle concerning Moab. Surely in night, Ar of Moab is devastated and ruined. Surely in a night, Kir of Moab is devastated and ruined. The names of these cities get worse. They have gone up to the temple and to Dibon, even to the high places to weep. Moab wails over Nebo. In Medeba, everyone's head is bald and every beard is cut off. What kind of cities, since he mentioned them, do you think Ar and Kir were? Why would he pick those out of Moab? They were well fortified. They weren't just a city they could just walk in and take. They were cities that should have been able to stand up to a siege, to being assaulted. And they took them. Dibon is mentioned also. Dibon was kind of one of the main cities in Moab, or Dibon, depending on where the accent is. And what it says in verse 2, they have gone up to the temple and to Dibon, and to the high places to weep. What would that kind of indicate? Would that indicate it's a religious center for them? A worship center? For the Moabites. Yeah, these are Moabites. These are pagans. So it would have been a high worship place for them. What was the god of the Moabites? Well, who'd they worship? Remember? Maybe the reason why Isaiah has 2 chapters. Chemosh. Chemosh is the god that demands human sacrifice of children into a fire. And God believes that one is particularly detestable as far as God's. And so there was a lot of friction there between that part of Moabites. But there's some good people in Moab. Who came from Moab that we have written that's in the line of the lineage of Christ? Ruth. Ruth was a Moabite. So, and she converted over to Judaism. Remember, she wouldn't leave Naomi. She followed her back. The other daughter-in-law did, but she left her, but Ruth went with her. So, what is happening in Judah? Are they escaping the Assyrian onslaught? Yeah, I mean, they're right there. They're between the proverbial rock and a hard place. Okay? Everything's taken to the north. Everything's taken to the west. Everything's taken to the east. Is Assyria staying out of Israel, out of Judah? No. No. It's narrowing down to one area that's safe for the Jews. And it's a very small area. And we'll get to that in a few verses. So, but King Hezekiah and Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, prayed about this and cried out to heaven. So, this is what's happening in Israel to tell you what's left. So I pulled this out of Chronicles to say, who's the king that followed Ahaz? What king followed Ahaz? Remember, this oracle started out that Ahaz has just died. Huh? No, but who's the king that follows Ahaz? Hezekiah. Hezekiah becomes the king in Israel, and what he's done, was he a good king, bad king? He was a good king, okay? Ahaz, which I believe was his father, was a bad king. Ahaz went in and he put all kinds of pagan worship. He brought pagan worship into the temple. That was Ahaz. Hezekiah, as soon as he got in there, he cleaned it up. All the high places where they had shrines to Asheroth and to Baal, had them cut down and destroyed. And he really reinstated the worship God for the Jews in Jerusalem. That was what Hezekiah did. So, and the Lord sent an angel. So this is Sennacherib. If you remember Sennacherib is one of the Assyrian kings. And he's the one who's come down and he's attacking. So that's the framework of this one. And Hezekiah is afraid that Sennacherib is going to take Jerusalem. And so he's praying. And the Lord sent an angel who destroyed every mighty warrior and officer in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned in shame to his own land. And when he had entered the temple with his God, some of his own children killed him there with a sword. So the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants in Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and from the hand of all others, and guided them on every side. And many were bringing gifts to the Lord at Jerusalem and choice presents to the Hezekiah, the king of Judah, so that he was exalted in the sight of all nations thereafter. So again, did Isaiah see this prophecy come for him? Yeah, he was still alive. The Assyrian king, who's the one turned away from Jerusalem? What was the Assyrian king? It's up there. It's not easy to say. Sennacherib. He was the king who was turned away. He had complete control over the rest of Israel. He couldn't get Jerusalem. And the people in the general area came inside the walls of Jerusalem for protection. So you've got this small area in Judah that is still for God. And God's protecting it. What about the rest of Judah? the Syrians conquered it. It was under their control. So a little bit here, again, we had talked about Tiglath-Pileser. Tiglath-Pileser was the one who took Damascus. Remember? Damascus was of Arman, was looking to take over and control Judah along with northern Israel. The kings made a pact between the two of them. And the king of Israel, instead of going to God, went to this guy and said, here, why don't you go ahead and take Damascus? And they did, okay? But you have, not too much longer later, you have Sargon that comes down into this particular part of the world. And Sargon conquers what's left in Israel, and then he went a lot east. And then you have the one that we're talking about right now, Sennacherib. Sennacherib came down into Judah, and all of it's green except for one spot, right around Jerusalem. But Sennacherib took the rest of it. And then you can kind of see you get the kings that go on through here from Sennacherib all the way down to the last one. And it's about 25 years from now. And 25 years from now is when you're going to get some bad kings back into Israel, into Judah. And that's when the Babylonians, under Nebuchadnezzar, take the Jews into captivity for 70 years. So that's the end of the Assyrian Empire. But that's how they moved down all the way through into Egypt. And I think, I'd have to look at it again, I think this area here gets into northern Ethiopia. You go from Egypt to the Sudan, northern Sudan, and then you go down to Ethiopia if you stay on the coast. That kind of puts it in terms of what our world is kind of shaped like right now. So, back to Isaiah. In the straits they have girded themselves with sackcloths on their housetops. Now this is back about Moab. This is where he's come down into Moab. Everyone is wailing, dissolved in tears. Heshbon and Elah also cry out. Their voice is heard all the way to Jahaz. Therefore the armed men of Moab cry aloud. His soul trembles within him. My heart cries out for Moab. His fugitives are as far as Zoar and Egath. You can read the rest of that one. For they go up the ascent, Lehuth, weeping. Surely on the road to Horonaim, they raise a cry of distress over their ruin. So how the people in that, how they reacted to the Assyrians? Oh, they're crushed. They're crushed. Yeah, they're devastated. They've gone through, and the Assyrians were not gentle and kind people. They were cruel. Why do you think the cities Isaiah mentions here correlates as far as what it's like in Moab? Heshbon, Elah, Zor, and where's Japheth? Is Japheth? Yeah, Jahaz. Those are all areas right there on the border or in either Reuben or Gad. So you've got Moab, and then you've got the different tribes of Judah. Reuben and Gad border Moab. So these cries of wailing and everything like that can be heard all the way over into eastern Judah, is what the scene that he's painting here. It's so bad. They can hear it there. I had to look up these cities to figure out where they were because I didn't know where they were either. For the waters of Nimrim are desolate. Surely the grass is withered. The tender grass died out. There is no green thing. Therefore the abundance which they had acquired and stored up, they carry off over the brook of Arabim. For the cry of distress has gone around the territory of Moab. Its wail goes as far as Eglaim, and its wailing even to Beer Eliam. For the waters of Dimon are full of blood. Surely I will bring added woes upon Dimon, a lion among the fugitives of Moab, and upon the remnant of the land. And Dimon is kind of the capital of Moab. So Nimon is known for clear or good water. What happened to it? It got really tainted. There's rotting people in it. They've destroyed so many people in it like that. So it's polluted. It was good, clear water. It was known for that good, clear water, and it isn't there anymore. So why do the people cry distress? They're just being mowed down. And there's nothing they can do about it. They thought they were secure, but the Assyrians came in and just mowed them down. Again, it's part of God working, because what did I say their God was? What did I say was the God of the Moabites? Chemosh, the most detestable god to God of the gods that the pagans had, because of what it demanded, what the people did for Chemosh. Send the tribute land to the ruler of the land, from Selah by the way of wilderness to the mountain of the daughter of Zion. So this is continuing. Chapter 15 was Moab, and it continues to talk about Moab in chapter 16. Then, like fleeing birds or scattered nestlings, the daughters of Moab will be at the fords of Ammon. Give us advice, make a decision, cast your shadow like night at high noon. Hide the outcast, do not betray the fugitive. Let the outcasts of Moab stay with you. Be a hiding place for them from the destroyer. The extortioner has come to an end. Destruction has ceased. Oppressors have completely disappeared from the land. So again, it's picking up with Moab and what's happening in Moab in chapter 16 from chapter 15. The people cry in distress. They're taking everybody as a slave, or they're killing them. That's what they're doing. Why will the daughters be at the ford of Arnon? Why do you think they would be there but have a problem getting across? I had to look this one up too. That's a picture of the ford at Fornon. The one on the left side is going into Ammon. The one on the right side is Moab. How are they going to get across? That's why they're there. That's why he's talking about they're stuck. They're fleeing. These are fugitives trying to get away from the Assyrians, and they've stopped because they can't get across this ford. It's huge. So that's what he's talking about. A throne will be established in loving kindness. A judge will sit on it, faithful in the tent of David. Moreover, he will seek justice and be prompt in righteousness. We have heard of the pride of Moab, an excessive pride, even of his arrogance, pride, and fury. His idle boasts are false. Therefore Moab will wail. Every one of Moab will wail. You will moan for the raisin cakes of Kir Hareseth as those who are utterly stricken. Whose throne will be established, and who will sit on it in faithfulness to the tent of David? Remember, put it in the context of this time frame. And this is probably Sennacherib, either Sennacherib or Sargon, which preceded Sennacherib, that is the Assyrian king that is coming down and sweeping through Moab. So who's going to get established on the king on the throne? That's going to be faithful to God. I just talked about him. Hezekiah. Hezekiah is going to be established on the throne because he's in the line of David. He's going to be established on the throne in Judah, and he's the one who's going to say, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. All this stuff that Ahaz brought in, gone. He's faithful to God. He's the one that I read out of Chronicles that prayed to God. He didn't say, I'm going to go make some sort of a deal with Sennacherib. I'm going to pay him off and all like that. He prayed to God. Hezekiah was faithful to God, and God rewarded him for that faith by preserving Jerusalem. And that's what it's talking about here, is it's contrasting how Judah has turned back to God, but Moab's arrogant. They stuck to their own gods, and they thought, we can take care of the Assyrians ourselves. And Sennacherib just mowed them down. Okay, who preceded Hezekiah? Ahaz, and he was a rotten king. So what did he do that's prompt and righteous? He worshiped the Lord. He got rid of all of the pagan worship. He had it stripped out from Judah. What's Moab guilty of? Yeah, they just ignored God. Why would they ignore God? They didn't. No, they knew of God. I mean, you're right there next to Judah. You know about the God of Israel. They said, our God's more powerful. Our God's going to take care of us. They had pride in their own God. And they said, no, your God's an empty God. All it is a stick or a stone. It didn't do a thing for you. Yeah, it was just arrogance. So that's what he says here in verse 6. Pride of Moab, an excessive pride, even of his arrogance, pride and fury. So their boasts to say, our God's going to take care of us. We can stand up to him. We've got fortified cities. And Sennacherib just mowed them down.
That reminds me of when they had, whether it was a goat or whatever, when they did that statue did nothing for them.
No, it didn't do a thing for them. And that was part of the point with some of these, if you will, pagan armies. It was with Nebuchadnezzar's army, it was with Sennacherib's army, with all those particular ones, is to say, hey, we've got such greater gods in our country because we destroyed you and we destroyed your gods because our gods were better than your gods. And it was always that competition between our God and your God.
You said that they sacrificed children, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Moab was the one where they had the one thing that I've seen is they had in the belly of it looked like a cow or a bull. It was a bull. And they had a mechanism where you could put it in the hands of the bull and it would do this and it would drop the child inside the fire.
So was it normally their own children, or did they?
They both. They could do with captives and sacrifice the captives, but they will also sacrifice their own child. Ahaz sacrificed his own child. That's how bad Ahaz was. He embraced Chemosh.
So the pride that they had in their own God, I mean, think about all of their own children that they sacrificed to them, so they actually sacrificed a lot of giving up your own kids
Over and over again for power. Yeah, that's what it was about. For the fields of Heshbon has withered, the vines of Sibmah as well. Lords of the nations have trampled down its choice clusters, which reached as far as Jazer and wandered to the deserts. Its tendrils spread themselves out and passed over the sea. Therefore I will weep bitterly for Jazer, for the vine of Sibmah. I will drench you with my tears, O Heshbon and Elah. For the shouting over your summer fruits and your harvest have fallen away. Gladness and joy are taken away from the fruitful field. In the vineyards also there will be no cries of joy or jubilant shouting. No treader treads out wine in the presses, for I have made the shouting to cease. So why does he mention these cities? They're in Israel. They're in Reuben and they're in Gad. So it's spilled over into that particular area where the Assyrians are conquering it. But it can't get as far west as Jerusalem because God is protecting that, which is like I said, what I read out of Chronicles, 2nd Chronicles, where Hezekiah prayed. But other parts of Israel are vulnerable. Therefore, My heart intones like a harp for Moab, and my inward feelings for Kir Hareseth. So it will come about when Moab presents himself, when he wearies himself upon his high place and comes to his sanctuary to pray, that he will not prevail. This is the word which the Lord spoke earlier concerning Moab. And now the Lord speaks, saying, within 3 years, as a hired man would count them, the glory of Moab will be degraded along with its great population, and his remnant will be very small and impotent. Kir Hareseth. It means pottery or brick. How well do you think it's fortified? Kir Hareseth means brick. It's well fortified. So that's why Isaiah pulled it out in his prophecy, is because this is another well fortified city that they thought they could depend on being tanking. Did I ask this one? Where are they going to pray? And why won't do any good? They're pagan God. Yeah, they're praying to Chemosh. They're still praying to Chemosh. An empty God. What's left of them? How final will this be, what the Assyrians do to Moab? They're almost going to be gone. Yeah, they're devastated. There's hardly anything left, going to be left of the people and the culture and everything of Moab. It's going to be so totally destroyed. Remember what happened with Ruth has happened a long time in the past from respect to this. So, judgment on Damascus. I'm doing all right this morning. The oracle concerning Damascus. Behold, Damascus is about to be removed from a city and will become fallen ruin. So, we started with Philistia being taken, and then Moab, and now it's Damascus. We're moving back in time, which is kind of weird, but we're moving back in time because the history on this one here is Damascus is in Aram, which was the name of that country. It wasn't part of the Assyrian Empire. Aram made a pact with Israel to attack Judah. And they prayed in Judah to say, may it not happen. But that was when the king of Judah, I'm trying to remember who he was. He was the first king that was the king when Isaiah started his prophecy. That king went to the king of the Assyrian Empire, which was north of Aram at that time, said, we'll give you some money, you go attack Damascus. So this was when the Assyrians first started coming down from the north into what was Damascus and Aram and Israel and Philistia and Moab. But before they went into Moab and Philistia and Israel, they took Aram, which Damascus is in. So that kind of, like I said, it's backing up in history when it's talking about it in these particular chapters, which can be really confusing. So, behold, Damascus is about to be removed from being a city and will become a fallen ruin. The cities of Aroer are forsaken. They will be flocks to lie down in, and there will be no one to frighten them. The fortified of the city will disappear from Ephraim, and the sovereignty from Damascus, and the remnant of Aram. Aram is the country, Damascus is the city in the country of Aram. They will be like the glory of the sons of Israel, declares the Lord of hosts. Now in that day, the glory of Jacob will fade, and the fatness of his flesh will become lean. So here you have it all tied together in the fact that they were going to launch their attack from Ephraim. Ephraim is right across the border from Judah. And they had this deal set up with the king of Israel and the king of Aram in Damascus to attack Judah. And this is where it talks about it, where God says, okay, I'll allow this to happen with Tiglath-Pileser that comes down in, which is the Assyrian king, and destroys Aram. But he didn't stop there. He went through, he took Damascus, he took Aram, And then he moved into northern Israel and Samaria, and he took that. So, I just said who's going to take Damascus and Aram? It's going to be Tiglath-Pileser III. He's an Assyrian king. Who's going to be left in Damascus? Nobody. Again, it's the Assyrian model. They come in, they destroy everything. How will the glory of Jacob fade and his flesh become lean? What does that mean? Who's Jacob? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. That's it, Jacob. What's the glory of Jacob? It's 12 tribes. What happens to the northern part of Israel? Northern part of the country? There's where 10 of the tribes are, right? So the glory of Jacob, the 12 tribes, 10 of them taken by the Assyrians. His flesh will become lean. In other words, it's going to be down to 2. There's only 2 tribes that are going to be left that are going to be sometimes serving God, sometimes not serving God. What are those 2 tribes? One of them's Judah. What's the other one? Huh? Benjamin. Benjamin. Little strip on the northern part of Judah is Benjamin. So it's going to be just those 2 tribes. All the other tribes taken by the Assyrians. It will be even like the reaper gathering the standing grain, as his arm harvests the ears. Or it will be like one gleaning ears of grain in the valley of Rephaim. Yet gleanings will be left in it like the shaking of an olive tree. 2 or 3 olives on the topmost bough, 4 or 5 on the branches of a fruitful tree, declares the Lord, the God of Israel. In that day, man will have regard for his Maker, and his eyes will look to the Holy One of Israel. He will not have regard for the altars, the work of his hands, nor will he look at that which his fingers have made, even the Asherim and incense stands. So what's the allusion to harvesting grain and shaking the olive branch refer to? This is all when you've got people that are in those areas, you can liken it to a big, big harvest. But what's left out of the harvest is a few little things. Who harvested Israel? Tiglath-Pileser. He harvested the people. And there was just a few people left. That's what he's talking about is, in the north, there'll be a few Jews left, and they're going to turn away from all these things that they made altars with their hands and their fingers, which is what he's talking about here. They're going to turn back to God. But it's going to be a remnant. It's going to be a small remnant that's going to be left out of all of the people that were there. Because the Assyrians took them into slavery and put them out of the parts of the world in the Assyrian Empire as slaves, and then they brought in their own Assyrian people, and then what Jews were left there had to work with the Syrian people that had been repopulated the area by the Assyrian Empire. That's why Samaria is regarded so negatively by the Jews. What we have in the New Testament is because they said, oh, it's those Assyrians descendants that are there in Samaria, and that's why they walked around it to go from Judah up to Galilee. But Christ didn't do that. He went through it. Yes, this is the remnant that would be faithful. This is the remnant that said, these gods that we had, which was common, happened. These gods that we had, they didn't protect us. But the God of heaven, who we've heard of, who we remember, we know who he is, and he protects. So Doug's going to pick up here next week. Excuse me? He's Judah. He's the Lion of Judah. That was faithful to the end. And it was repopulated The Assyrians are from just north of Damascus. That's where they started. No, they were Assyrian. You had the Assyrians, then you had the Babylonians, then you had the Medes and Persians. So we're 2 empires away from the Persians. They were together. Cyrus was a Persian, and Darius, who was the king, they installed as the king in Babylon, was a Mede. And if you look at the original map, Persia's here, and just north of it is Media. So the Medes were from Media, and the Persians were from Persia. You what?
I don't know where the Assyrians come. Sing the one.